Coming to you from the greatest city in the world, this is the #1 showbiz podcast. It's Talk for Two. Here's your host, Matt Bailey.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Don't you just love Gary Owen's voiceover? Thank you very much, Gary. Now, this is day 2 of week of 100. As always, I want to thank our season sponsors, Axtel Expressions and the Tangent Bound Network. Go check them out and support them. I got to keep these shout-outs short and sweet this week because we have a lot of ground to cover, and today is no exception. I'm really excited because we delve into the business end of showbiz and we chat with a legend. Ken Kragen is best known as one of the most high-profile talent managers in Hollywood. He's responsible for the USA for Africa campaign, which released the iconic We Are the World single. And of course, Michael Jackson performed that song all over the world. We miss him very much. The campaign, which raised over $160 million for Africa when combined to its sister campaign, Hands Across America, is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. Kragen, who no longer represents talent full-time, sat down with me to discuss his career and what it takes to make it in this business. Here now to tell us how he can instantly tell if somebody has star quality, our interview with Ken Kragen. Ken Kragen, welcome to Talk for Two. How are you today, sir?
Pleasure to be here. It's good to talk to you, Matt.
Oh, good to talk to you. Legendary agent, producer, manager, author, just all around. If there's something in show business that you like, I'm sure this gentleman was in some way involved in it. I'm really excited that you get to share your story and for our listeners to hear. How did you get started? Do you consider yourself more of a producer or an agent? It's always tough to find one label with somebody who's done as much as you have. What do you consider yourself?
Well, I consider myself somebody who likes to have a good time doing what I'm doing and work on whatever I'm excited and enthusiastic about.
Yeah.
But I actually got started, not exactly accidentally. I was producing concerts in high school, actually, and then in college. Way back, way a long time ago, I predated Bill Graham as the premier producer for a little bit in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Oh, that's cool.
But then I got an opportunity to go off to Harvard Business School.
Yeah.
And my dad, who was a vice chancellor at UC Berkeley, my dad said, "You better go. If you don't go to grad school now, you'll never go to grad school at all. This is your chance." So I went off, and actually the day I arrived at Harvard Business School, a group called the Kingston Trio went #1, and I had been involved in producing concerts for them, and I thought I'd kind of blown my career.
Yeah.
But during my second year there, another group approached me and asked me if I would be their executive secretary. And probably the guttiest thing I ever did, I said to these guys, "Look, I'm not going to Harvard Business School to be an executive secretary. If you guys want a manager," not that I knew what a manager really did, but if you want a manager, I'll be happy to do that. And they agreed to have me manage them, and I knew less about management than they did, practically nothing about it. But I was able to take the group and build them up to the point that they became a very big act, and actually #2 at RCA behind Elvis Presley at the time. Oh, cool. This was in the 60s.
Oh, wow. And
the day they broke up, I signed a couple of guys named Tom and Dick Smothers, the Smothers Brothers.
Oh, yes.
And went through the 60s just riding that train. I mean, we ended up with the #1 show on television. We ended up with, sold-out concerts everywhere. And just built a career around one success after another. It was kind of gutty to go from Harvard Business School, where the guys were coming out and making a ton of money, to a job that had no guarantees whatsoever. But it turned out to be, my career. And I never. You mentioned agent a couple of times. I never was an agent. Agents are essentially the ones who book.
Yeah.
They make the deal with the buyer for the talent. Managers have a much broader role. Managers are really involved in different ways. There are managers who are record producers, and managers who are attorneys, managers who are wives, and stuff or husbands of talent. But a manager's role, as I've always viewed it, is a broad role to do anything and everything to advance an artist's career, and more importantly, to be sure that career services the individual's life. I teach management a lot, and I teach careers.
Yeah.
And I always talk about the idea that your career has to service your life. That your career is just one of the tools you use to have the best life possible. So, as a manager, I want to help design a career that services your life. And in all the years, I don't manage anymore now. I do a lot of other things, but managing, that was always my view.
Yeah, and why do we now consider agent and manager? Because I admit, slip of the tongue there. But why do we consider those roles? Why are they used so interchangeably? What's the confusion?
Well, I think the confusion actually comes from the fact that there are a number of people that do both, and California restricts you from doing both. As a manager, you can be in trouble if you book your artists and you don't use an agent or a lawyer. And there's a big lawsuit going on about that right now, and there have been a number of problems with that. It isn't true everywhere. It's not true throughout the country. And what has also happened is licensed agents. I've got a couple of friends that Lionel Richie's manager is also an agent, a company called Red Light Management, and they do everything. So I think that's where it's all kind of come together. It evolved way back in the 1930s, in the last century, when it just was a problem for the artists to directly approach buyers, or there needed to be somebody in between, and there was the agents. First, the agents came about, and they came about even earlier, probably in the 20s or earlier. And then the artists found that if they didn't have somebody speaking to the agent, they weren't getting heard. They weren't getting attention paid to them. So managers grew up, as I've been told. I wasn't around then, but in the 1930s, managers came to really intercede and promote the artist as much in terms of dealing with the agents as anyone. And that's where they initially started, and then it just grew over the years as a business. Finally, just this April, they created the Personal Managers Hall of Fame, and I'm proud to have been one of the early inductees to it.
Congratulations.
I'm not only proud to have been inducted. I was proud to be inducted because I was actually physically alive and there to accept the award, because half of them had passed away, and one of the most famous ones, Jack Rollins. There was Rollins and Jaffe. I'm trying to think which one turned 100 the week of the ceremony. Couldn't come out from New York and passed away about a month later. So, yeah. So when I gave my acceptance speech, the first thing I said is, I'm not only happy to receive this, I'm actually happy to be alive and here to receive it.
It's wonderful, and it's it's a profession that is often, a lot of times the behind the scenes stuff gets kind of pushed down and not talked about a lot. And I'm just so curious. Let's go back to the Smothers Brothers, talking about appeal as a manager when a client interests you. What appealed to you about the Smothers Brothers? Because I'm familiar with their work, so they're a good model to talk about.
Yeah, it's true of everything. There's a thing that I feel when somebody says to me, "So what is the key to your success?" None other than just total honesty, which I think has served me extremely well. I somehow was born almost with a gut sense of what a real star quality was, so that I could tell if somebody had this X factor when they walked in the room. In the Smothers Brothers case, I could go to a club, a little tiny club called the Purple Onion in San Francisco in the early 60s, and see them perform, and just know that there was something very, very special about them. I always have had that that I tried to teach it. When I had a large company in the 80s,
Yeah.
I used to do sessions trying to teach that judgment about real talent, because, real talent has an extra dimension to it, star quality, the ones that can really become major stars. Number one, they do something that's unique. They do something that really stands out as different. Secondly, the thing I found about true superstars is when, in general, when the game's on the line, sort of like Michael Jordan, when the game's on the line, he wanted the ball and he knew he would score. The Smothers Brothers, Kenny Rogers, Lionel Richie, so many of my clients, when the game was on the line, they took their game up another level.
Yeah.
They raised their game to another level. I even saw Kenny do it one time on a golf course.
Wow.
I had 150 people hidden in bushes and rocks to surprise him on the 18th hole on his birthday, and then we had a big celebration in the club afterwards.
Oh, cool.
And he came up to the hole. He was off the green. He chipped to within 9 feet and sunk the putt once he knew he had a crowd and an audience.
Wow.
Because everybody jumped out and yelled happy birthday prematurely. So he had to hit the last 2 shots with the crowd there. And he just took his game up. A physical game. I mean, and that quality, was a tremendous quality. Now, he would tell you he does it because he didn't want to be embarrassed, not just the golf thing, but anything, that he takes his game up, for that. But he had the ability to do it. That's the amazing thing. And that's a superb quality. First, they have to have something unique, something that makes them stand out, is special. And then they really have to have this extra dimension. I find true stars, I can feel it when they walk in a room.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And that intuition is certainly the secret, like you said, to your success. But what about the flip side to that? I find that my big question to managers, and it's coming out of ignorance, is it's kind of a chicken and the egg sort of situation. You can have a talent that you love and that you represent, but you have to have those business end connections as well. Maybe this is going back to your days before Harvard, but where did that come that you were able to make those connections for your artists on the business end of it and get them those jobs that they deserved?
Well, I've always preached and taught that you take advantage of whatever you have.
Yeah.
And what I had early on was tremendous enthusiasm and belief in the acts I was managing, excitement about them, basically almost like a fan,
Yeah.
a willingness to work my tail off and bust through the walls and the barricades that were put up in front of me, to keep pushing even when I got no kind of answers,
Yeah.
and to trade on my naivete. To, in a sense, you've seen politicians do this sometimes.
Yes.
Emphasize their, I'm just a country boy kind of thing, But to some extent, I utilized it. If I think back in those early days, I utilized the fact I didn't know all the answers, and I learned to ask for help and advice. I mean, one of the first places people that I ever asked for help and advice was the program director, or maybe it was even just the librarian of a big radio station in Boston while I was going to Harvard, about the group that I had taken on. And it turned out that particular guy who gave me great advice was a man named Joe Smith, who went on to be co-president of Warner Brothers Records.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I did a lot of business with him years later. But I went to him really, with my group's album under my arm and no idea how to promote it. And and asked him for advice. I just found him randomly, and not only did he turn out to give me great advice at that moment, but later on he turned out to be one of the great relationships. And then a lot of the other relationships, as you have success, and as you have, the great thing about Tommy Smothers taught me this. You mentioned the Smothers Brothers.
Yeah.
Tommy Smothers taught me that if you are the controlling person in terms of somebody getting the talent, by that I mean a TV show that wants to book your talent, or a concert promoter, or whoever. If you if you're, as a manager, making those decisions, or at the very least the one who carries those questions and decisions to the artist, and you're the conduit to them getting stuff done, you can pretty much name your role, so that when the Smothers Brothers got a television show, my then partner, Ken Fritz, and I became what today would be called executive producers. In those days, I think we were called consulting producers or something. Uh-huh. But we were in charge of the show. We didn't have, there were producers, a guy named Ernie Chambers, and a couple of other guys. I'm blanking on one of the names now. But we would, but we had control because we were management, and we controlled access to the artist. And Tommy taught me that. And over the years, I became, a film producer, producer of concerts and all kinds of stuff. I could pretty much, whatever role I wanted. Granted, you could just get a credit, but I never was interested in just getting the billing. I wanted to play the actual role. I mean, when I went and created the Gambler series of movies for Kenny Rogers, which I did, those first few movies, every single frame of that film, I had some input on. I was sitting there when they edited it. I was sitting there when they put the sound and the sound effects on. I was involved in the casting. I didn't direct the film. I hired the director, but I had a role that was, even though I had a producer or executive producer title, I was involved in every aspect of it. And I think you find a lot of times that, big successes are created by somebody who has that kind of incredible focus and attention to every detail.
Yeah.
And certainly look at Steve. I'm no Steve Jobs, but look at what Steve Jobs at Apple was like. He was involved in every last aspect.
Absolutely. But back to what you were saying about the manager. In your role, you could pick any title and any way that you wanted to go with these different productions. Is that the ability to do that? Is that disappearing in our modern entertainment and media landscape in terms of film production and all of that, or is it just as alive and well as when you were doing it?
I still think if you're George Clooney's manager, and I don't even know if he has one, you can be the executive producer of his film, and more so, you can be his partner in the film, and there's all kinds of roles you can play. So I think that quality has not changed, because if you control the access to the talent, and I don't just mean by being an assistant or something, but in a decision making capacity, you still have that leverage. You still are, you still have that opportunity. I don't think that has changed. I don't think that ever really will change. Certainly, major feature film work and stuff. I mean, it takes. You look at the credits sometimes run practically as long as the movie. Yeah. There are a lot of people involved.
Yeah.
So our business does evolve tremendously. I mean, the record business has changed dramatically in terms of the way you get a hit record now and the way you have a career. And things are always evolving. But, I just always, you play on your strengths there have been all kinds of management roles as a manager. I'm thinking of James Taylor and Linda Ronstadt's manager, Peter, why am I blanking on his last name? He was a record. First, he was talent.
Yeah,
he was a part of an act in England, and then he became management. And he, as management, he produced all the records. I mean, he was a record producer because he had all that background. I just met this week a manager named Paul Gehry, who started as a drummer and had a huge hit record in a band he formed. Sold 10 million copies, he said, of records at one point. I mean, but he became a manager. He went to the other side and became a manager. And I think that experience that he had serves him well. Plus, it gives him credibility with the artists because they know he's been there like they've been there.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting kind of thing.
It really is. And you talk about being involved. I have to ask this question. because this is how I was introduced to your work and everybody that you represented. Is I'm a big late night TV junkie, and so I have seen The Late Shift numerous times. I wasn't going to ask this, but you mentioned being involved wherever you saw fit to do it. What made you want to play yourself in that HBO film?
Well, because I like to have a good time, because I like to have fun. And one of my employees walked in one day. We have in the movie business and the television business every day what are called the breakdowns. And the breakdowns list the roles that are being cast and describe those roles. And this employee of mine walked in my office and he said, "You're not going to believe this. Look at who they're casting." And I looked on the sheet and it said, Ken Kragen, and it described me as they at least described me, for this was the name of the character.
Yeah.
So I said to him, and really as a joke, I said, "Call these people up. Tell them." In those days you could call up. Nowadays you have to submit everything by email or whatever, or an agent has to submit. He said, "Call these people up and say, you got a guy who fits this role perfectly. He's exactly right to play Ken Kragen." And I said, "And just do it and see, get a laugh out of it." So he calls up, and a few minutes later he comes into my office and he says, "You're not going to believe this, but they want you to come out and read for the role." I said, "They want me to come out and read for me?" He said, "Absolutely. They love the idea. They think it'd be a great stunt." So I went out there and I went in and I tried to convince them not to use me. I said, "Look, I'm not an actor. And my experience is it's probably harder to play yourself than get into the role of being somebody else." But they said, no, we think this is a great idea and we want to do it. So anyway, the way they finally convinced me to do it, and you've seen her in this role, was that what's her name was playing the lead. I was playing opposite
Kathy Bates.
God, my yeah, Kathy Bates.
Yeah,
I'm having trouble with names today.
That's cool.
Kathy Bates. I said, "Wait a second. I'm going to get to be able to say to people, I played opposite Kathy Bates in a movie. Holy cow! I'm going to do it just for the fun of it." And I went to the reading, and this was the funny part. I went. They had a pre-reading of the script, and they had about 30 actors there, and when they got to me, I had to read with Kathy Bates, and all these other great actors are there, and I just as soon as it was done, as soon as the reading was over, I went up to the director and I said to her, "Listen, why don't you go get a real actor for this? I shouldn't be here with all these actors." And she said, No, you're doing great. Don't worry about it. And it was quite an experience. It was a typical experience. They flew us in. We at those days lived on a ranch up in the middle of California.
Yeah.
We flew in and got there in the early morning. They didn't use me till 7:30 at night, by which time they had changed the entire script, which I'd learned, my part anyway, and then at the last minute changed it back to the original. So I learned it first one way, then I learned it back the other way, then I learned it back the original way.
Wow.
And then they said to me, "Oh, listen, it's getting so late. We have to send Kathy Bates home because of what we call in the movie business turnaround. We can't. We need her back tomorrow morning, and we've got to give her 12 hours. You're gonna do this with the script supervisor. She's gonna read the lines that would have been Kathy Bates's lines because we were only talking over the phone anyway."
Yeah.
And so it was and then we're in a hurry. So I had that entire role. I got one or two takes of it, and it was a big kick. But my wife got to play my secretary in that case, and that I love that. I mean, I've seen that scene now, and I use it in my classes sometimes, kind of to show people why honesty works.
Yeah.
That's what worked for me in that thing.
Yeah.
What worked for me was people trusted me. And when I said that Helen Kushnick was doing all of these rather nasty things to people, I was believed because people knew I told the truth.
Yeah, and let's not to rehash things that are decades in the past, but that is so fascinating to me. Do you think that this generation of late night hosts has learned the lesson from a debacle that really spanned 25 years? Because they did that in the 90s, and then the whole thing with Conan was just the same sort of mix-up with who gets the job and all of that, and booking guests and just going with late night.
For anybody who's listening and doesn't not aware of the Late Shift, which you can still see and certainly get on Netflix or anything, the basic issue really was the movie is about the battle between Letterman and Leno for Johnny Carson's slot, and Leno eventually wins it, and his manager, and unfortunately she's passed away now, but his manager Ellen Kushnick played a pretty big role in him getting the Tonight Show. She maneuvered things quite significally, but she wasn't an easy person to deal with, and she drove everybody nuts. And
That's
she
underselling it.
She was pretty coarse too. In fact, during that filming, Kathy Bates called me and said, "I've got to find some redeeming qualities in this woman. I'm sure she has them." And I said, "Kathy, I'm sure too that she has them. I'm sure she was a mother with kids and everything. I'm sure that's all there. I never saw it. I only saw the tough business side and the side that used more four-letter words than any other person I'd ever talked with."
Yeah.
And I said, all I saw was her basically threatening me if I didn't give her one of my clients for the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
And I said, and I wouldn't do that, and that's what blew the whole thing up. She lost her position with Jay, and she lost her job as the executive producer of the Tonight Show. But it wasn't just over what happened with me. She'd been doing difficult things for months and months. And
Jay being ever loyal, it was tough for him to.
Yeah, in fact, the biggest thing she did was President Reagan was speaking at the Republican National Convention, and it was running long, and she called the network and told them to pull Reagan so the Tonight Show could go on, and otherwise she was going to close the show and go home. And they wouldn't pull Reagan, obviously. The network wasn't in a power to do it, even if they wanted. Well, I guess they could have turned him off, and he still would have been talking. But she closed the show. She took the Tonight Show staff and everybody and left. Sent the audience home and left. Network lost the advertising money. It was embarrassing. And, so she had a lot of enemies out there. And when somebody finally stood up to her, which happened to be me, boy, you couldn't believe it. It was pretty fun in a way for me. It wasn't fun at the time. You never like to bring anybody down. But, anyway.
But
I'm glad you've seen the movie. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And again, just to reiterate that question, what do you make of what happened with Conan and Jay and that shift where he went to 10 and all of that? Do you think they didn't learn their lesson at the network, or it was just...
Yeah, first place, the people change, for one thing. You ended up with different people at different times running the thing. And I think, unfortunately, everybody's human and mistakes get made.
Yeah.
And people... I've been involved in a situation recently with one of my consulting clients where we're not as transparent as I like to be about who all we're talking to and who all we're making deals with.
Yeah.
And I've spoken out a few times, but they're still bent on the idea of being more secretive about what we're doing, and it's very uncomfortable for me. I think transparency is the way you avoid those kinds of issues.
Yeah.
And they didn't do that. They didn't involve the people involved and give them straight stories, and that's how it always backfires.
Yeah. So let's shift gears here and talk about something really, really cool that I love that you did. The We Are the World campaign, USA for Africa and Hands Across America, raised a combined, I was reading, $100 million for aid in Africa. I know that it was Harry Belafonte's idea. What made you want to do it? Why was this a special thing for you?
Well, it was interesting. First place, the figure that I've seen most recently is about 106 million.
Wow!
So you're correct, but the wild part of it is it keeps raising money. We're giving away not a lot this year, but we're probably going to give $100,000 in grants this year, and we're 30 years into it. This is the 30th anniversary of We Are the World, and next year is the 30th anniversary of Hands Across America.
Oh, cool!
But Belafonte originally came to me inspired by the pictures of children dying in Africa that were being shown on network television, and the horrible things that were happening there. And he came to me to organize a concert. I've been trying to organize a concert for poverty issues in America for about a year and not gotten anywhere. And Bob Geldof had just finished doing Do They Know It's Christmas in England and had tremendous success with it. So I basically said to Harry, why don't we just, take the Geldof idea? We've got even bigger stars here that we can draw on. And with your help and the connections you have and with my clients, I already had several big clients at that point. I had one of the biggest agents or management companies in the business at that point.
Oh, yeah.
We can put this together and let's do a record like Geldof did. And Harry liked that idea a lot. And I literally hung up the phone and picked up the phone, called Kenny Rogers and said, "Are you a part of it?" And he said, "I'm in." Drove over to Lionel Richie's house, and Lionel loved it. We both got in the car because he was going to host the American Music Awards. Drove over to Dick Clark's office, and on the way I thought, wait a second, let's do this on the night of the American Music Awards because all the artists will be in town.
Oh, cool.
And that simplified things greatly. By the end of the week, Harry called me back and said, "Have you thought about this?" And I said, "Well, I'll tell you, I've got a song being written by Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie, and I've got Stevie Wonder, Kenny Rogers, Lindsey Buckingham from Fleetwood Mac, Kim Carnes. Several of those were clients of mine, not Stevie, but the rest of them." I said, "Quincy Jones is producing." And he said, "Oh, good. I guess you've thought about it." And, with everybody's help, we, over the next 28 days, really, we organized there's very little you could get done between Christmas and New Year's. That was the truth at that point. But by the beginning of the January, we were going out and trying to lock up 2 artists a day and working our way down the record charts. And it turned out great. Everybody in my staff and a lot of other people pitched in, and we ended up with a historic recording.
That's awesome.
And
I think.
By the way, it almost didn't happen. I mean, one of the Rockers managers came to me the night before the event and said the Rockers think the song is too pop. They don't like it that much, and they don't want to stand on the stage next to the non-Rockers. He didn't say it, but they were worried that it would somehow make them less hip.
Yeah.
But Springsteen wouldn't go anywhere. When they approached Bruce, he said, "I'm out here to save lives. I'm not going anywhere." So
awesome.
Nobody bolted. Everybody was there the next night. Yeah.
That's just wow. I love the stories like this because this is the stuff you don't get to see, and I think it's going to continue to sell. The reason it's sold 6 million more than even the figure that I found, I think, is because of iTunes and what technology can do to help you find the music.
Well, when Michael died that year, we've been doing a few $100,000 a year on the record, heavily from Japan. Japan is just amazing on this record, but when Michael died that year, I think We Are the World raised another $2 million, wow. just based on people going in and ordering Michael's records and We Are the World, because it was certainly one of his best-known efforts ever, he and Lionel together. And Lionel now closes his show with it. Lionel stayed away from it for a number of years. He kind of left it to be Michael's.
Yeah.
And then about a year ago, I was approached by Lionel and his current management about using We Are the World as his closing, and we gave them a bunch of materials and visuals to use. And apparently, I haven't gotten to see it. I'm dying to see it, but I hear it's a super close to a show.
Wow!
So
awesome.
he's now doing it, and I'm thrilled that he is.
Such an amazing.
And gee, with the anniversary this year, I mean, we get so many requests for people wanting to license it for things, and it's not easy because you've got not only Lionel's publishing company involved, but you've got, most importantly, you've got the Michael Jackson estate, and it just always gets rather complicated there.
Yeah, it's
but boy, I mean, it's one thing I can ask teens today if they know anything about Ants Across America, and they have no idea. And when I show them that we put all those millions of people holding hands from one part of the country, one end of the country to the other, they're amazed. But boy, they all know we are the world.
Yeah.
It's still to this day universal.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. It's just one of those timeless songs that's going to last well into the next several generations. And I'm really excited that this, excuse me, that we got you on the anniversary of it. You said 30 years? 30 years?
30 years,
wow.
Yeah. Hard to believe, that it's 30 years ago. It seems like not exactly yesterday, but only a few years ago that I was doing that.
Oh, yeah.
Hard to believe what's gone down in all those years between the time we did that and now. But, it's still my biggest calling card, that. And probably the biggest accomplishment was the year later with Ants Across America.
Oh, yeah.
The reason I say that is even though We Are the World will last longer in everybody's mind and is, iconic, it'll be there forever. When you think about Ants Across America, it's impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, to
How
have
you did it.
millions.
How you did it. Wow.
Well, we did it with 400 paid employees, most of whom had worked as political campaign people that have to get people out, for speeches and events and stuff like that. And it was an off-political year. So our overall director for Ants Across America, Fred Dresch? No, anyway, the guy that came in had been a big political guy doing campaigns, and then the operatives that he brought in under him were all these people who had worked in politics. So we had a staff of 400. We then had an organization of 40,000 volunteers nationally.
Wow.
So literally in every town, no matter how big that we went through, we had all these people to staff the line and to help get people out. And, we did it over 9 months. We worked on this for 9 months. We fortunately had Coca-Cola put up the money, the initial money. They gave us $5 million initially.
Wow.
And then Citibank came in later and gave us another $3 million.
Incredible.
And then we raised million. We ended up raising about $34 million from it.
Wow.
But Ants Across. Now the biggest thing also was when We Are the World, we paid for nothing. We Are the World, several $1 million of cost was absorbed by whoever was doing whatever, whether it was record companies or distributors or the people that filmed it or the studio that A&M Studios at the time that gave us the studios there. It was all free, and we didn't use a penny of it. And then to get the organization going, 4 of us put up $50,000 each, and Lionel and Kenny Rogers and myself. And was it Melissa Manchester? One of the other artists put up money for it, and we used that $200,000 to get the organization going. But as far as the actual event, we never spent a penny. Ants Across America cost $17 million to put on.
Wow.
Now couple of million of that was insurance.
Yeah.
Insurance was extremely costly. But Ants Across America, by that time, a year later, there'd been Live Aid, there'd been Farm Aid, there'd been all of these other events, and people were tiring of doing everything for free. They couldn't really afford it. We had people working for us for 9 months, and you just couldn't do that. Nobody could give you 9 months free. So we spent a significant amount of money making Heads Across America happen. But more importantly, the times were right. The timing was right. You know, and going back to another thing, a very significant thing for anybody listening to this to keep in mind, and that is it had never been done before. It appeared to be impossible. And I lecture all the time these days. I lecture corporately and teach in various schools, UCLA being one of them. I teach the fact that it's easier to accomplish the impossible than the ordinary. And the reason is you've got to get people's attention to get them to do anything. And when you're attempting to do the impossible, people talk about it. People think maybe I'll get involved and help. You know, they may laugh at what you're doing initially, but if you start to show some traction, you'd be amazed at how quickly they jump in to be part of history. And it's just easier to do the impossible.
That is an incredible lesson and an incredible place to stop this. Ken Kragen, thank you so much for being with us today. This was an honor, sir. Thank you so much. And congratulations.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I certainly enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much. Congratulations on 30 years with We Are the World, and next year's 31 years with Hands Across America. Just incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt.
Ken, thank you for your time. Man, didn't I tell you guys this would be a week of icons? Thank you, Ken. I love it when successful people remain so down to earth and accessible. Guys, you really couldn't meet a nicer gentleman, and this was such a treat. That's it for us today. As I told you yesterday, we're kind of keeping these end bits kind of short and sweet because we got a lot of ground to cover this week. And I'm so looking forward to tomorrow with Bill Engvall. It's going to be awesome. In the meantime, you can find all you need to know about Talk for Two by going to our website, talk4, spell out 2.com. That's talk numeral 4, TWO.com. And here's the best part. If you're catching us after we've already aired everything, you could just go ahead and click on Bill's interview. Please go ahead and do that. Reach out by emailing talkfortwocast@gmail.com and find our group or like us on Facebook by searching for Talk for Two. Tweet us and about us using @ and hashtag Talk42. Signing off for Talk for Two, I am Matt Bailey, reminding everyone out there to keep talking for two.
You can hear more show business interviews with the stars at talkfor2.com, where you'll also find one-of-a-kind products to improve your own show. That's talk, the number 4, TWO.com.